who I sort of reached out to and told her she was a caricature artist. She didn't know. And I said, well, listen, your work is so amazing and so fun and so creative, and your likenesses are spot on. Like how do you not know you're a caricature artist? And I'm not holding that against her by any means. I like to think of it as my duty as an officer of this organization to find caricature in the wild and nurture it and encourage it. And Kristy needs none of that. You have all of this completely on lock. Your work is amazing. And I wouldn't have found it if you weren't so like proficient at your social media presence.
Thank you.
And I think everyone here is going to learn a lot from watching Kristy share and talk about her paper cut technique. So without further ado, please welcome Kristy Edgar.
Hello. Hi. Thank you. And I'm actually, this was kind of a hit or miss whether or not I was actually going to be able to make it. I had really bad food poisoning on Saturday, and the last 2 days I've kind of been sleeping. So I've really been hitting Vegas hard, but not in the fun way. So I titled mine "Making the Cut," and it has obviously 2 different meanings, which hopefully will kind of bring themselves to light as we go on. So there we go. So as Tom very graciously introduced me, my name is Kristy, and I am a paper artist. And I think the 3 kind of qualifying factors that kind of are identifiable about my art is 1, obviously it's made out of paper. This is generally how I look 90% of the time. 2, a lot of work I do is very tiny, so the scale of which it's very tiny. And 3, I really find a lot of satisfaction out of the challenge of constructing something that has such a limited but also full of potential medium. These are my cats. I don't know that has anything to do with being a paper artist, but I feel like they do because they're very helpful. These 2 are brother and sister. It's Mochi and Waffles, and that Ollie. He's very happy to be sitting there, as you can clearly see. They're very helpful in all aspects of things I do. And speaking of helpful, this is my 2-year-old son. His name is Leo, and he is the biggest critic of all of the work that I do. I generally work in this office, and I kind of surround myself with a lot of different art. This used to be my office until I became a full-time mom / artist, and now I generally work downstairs on our Fisher-Price table while we watch Storybots, which is great. Being an artist thus far, I've gotten the opportunity to work on some really cool projects. My art was in the Vince Gilligan's. Yeah, I met Weird Al, right? Oh my God. That was, no, you have no idea. Like, I was dying when I met him. I've loved him since I was 10. In fact, that was the first thing I said to him, which wasn't weird at all. But my work was in the Vince Gilligan's 99% Pure art curated book of Breaking Bad art. My art was in the fan art episode, which for Bob's Burgers. I was contacted by the people at Dancing with the Stars to do promotional work for their Disney night. This one's Sky Jackson. I didn't know who that was. The other one I did was Backstreet Boys, and I was so much more excited about doing that one, which I used to be a teacher, and my students were just like, who's that? I'm like, this is why no one likes your generation. Like, how do you not know that? And then I often would do work with Gallery 1988 in Los Angeles. And the first show I did was the Weird Al show. And oh my God, it was the best. Like, he was the nicest human being that I've ever met in my entire life. So if anyone ever meets Weird Al, like, he's the nicest human. I've also gotten the opportunity to be shared by various different social media outlets, which has helped kind of garner more interest and support of the work that I do. I've also gotten to talk to various different podcasts, and I've been interviewed by a few different companies. I've had a few articles written about my work. But I think the most important thing that I ever did as an artist is one time I gave Belle a tiny version of herself. So I've actually given art to a princess, which I feel like it does not get better than that. This year alone, it was kind of, when I first made this, I thought it was more interesting. But then when Laramie was talking about how he does like 26 portraits a night, and I'm like, I did 50 this year. Mine generally take a little longer, but I've done 50 portraits this year. I've had 7 shop updates, which means that I've created between 40 and 80 pieces to sell, and I've made well over 100, probably 200 or more designs. I've done a ton of paper tiny art just this year. So the reason I kind of wanted to start off with telling you where I am today was to kind of give you some context of how I got to that point, because it was not a straight path. But I can pinpoint specifically where it started, and it started when I was 5. And I took an art class, and my teacher loved the work so much, which was this wonderful painting. And it was chosen to be in an art gallery. It was our public library, where people came and like talked about it and wanted to like ask me questions. And at that moment, I was like, I'm gonna be an artist. That's it. I love when people come and talk to me and think that what I do is cute and wonderful, and I'm gonna be an artist. Done. Path set. So then I started writing books with my mom. My dad was in the military, and so when he was deployed, I would draw like what we did that day, and my mom would narrate it. So then I decided I was going to be an author and an illustrator, and that was it. That's my path. That's what I'm going to do. When I was in 2nd grade, I wrote my first like book. The prompt was write about a very important day in your life. And I wrote about the day my dad took me to a rock store, which is exactly what it sounds like. It's a store that sold rocks. And I won because I think everyone else wrote about like the birth of their brother or Christmas, and I wrote about a rock store. So I did come in first, and so I was just like, yes, that's all the affirmation I need. This is what I'm going to do with my life. I wrote a couple more throughout elementary school. Then I started writing comics. I was really into frogs. You know how like kids sometimes will like get oddly interested in like one thing and be able to tell you every single fact about that thing? That's what it was me for frogs. I could tell you anything about frogs. Around 3rd grade, when Pokemon was like starting to get big, I decided I was going to make my own card series, as one would naturally do. And I had all of these cards I made, and there was about 250 of them. And at this point, I kind of want to make it, I guess, known that anytime I decide I'm going to do something, I kind of don't just like do it a little bit. I do like, I'm not going to make 5 cards. I'm going to make 250 cards, which will kind of manifest itself a little bit more. But then in 7th grade, I created my opus, my most proudest achievement as a 12-year-old. And that was a soap opera that I wrote about my friend's love interests that I called Life is a Stage. Now, fun fact about this, it actually takes place in Las Vegas. I had never been to Las Vegas. I grew up in Omaha, Nebraska. So this is a 12-year-old's perspective of what Las Vegas is, as depicted by her also 12-year-old friends. So this was I said that the characters' names were changed to protect them from paparazzi and lawsuits because I knew this was going to get published someday. It's 62 pages long. Like, I don't know. I had a lot of friends is what I'm trying to tell you. Like, I was very popular in middle school. Now, this being obviously a caricature conference, I wanted to show you how I viewed my friends when I was 12. And I cannot stress enough, these are meant to be depicting 12-year-olds. So this was my core group of friends. I don't know why we had such long legs, but we did. This one right here is very important. That was Jasmine. Her name's not really Jasmine. I can't tell you her real name, but that was Jasmine. And she was a character that changed like every chapter because there were chapters obviously in the book. So here she is now. She's a biker girl. There was a character that was a devil and a monk who was promiscuous. Oh, and a JoJo character that played clarinet, apparently. I don't know. Now she's a Viking. There was also a lot of pirates, and this was my evil twin. Oh, this was the Vermilion Pumpernickel, which was meant to be a play on the Scarlet Pimpernel because I thought I was really clever. So anyway, oh, now she's a senator's wife, and there's some more pirates. So the reason I'm showing you this is this was kind of my first attempt at drawing my friends and getting feedback on being a caricature artist. I didn't really foresee myself, like I didn't see myself as a caricature artist. I just saw myself as somebody who liked to draw my friends in ridiculous scenarios. But my friends loved them. And so that was kind of just solidifying my interest in, my decided path. And then I got to second semester in 7th grade. First of all, look at that little 7th grader. She's so cute. Look at those bangs. Yeah, she braces and acne. It was great. So when I was in 7th grade, I was so excited because my second semester, I'd be taking my very first art class. And I'd taken like art class, like when the teacher would roll on the cart and stuff. But this was my first art class. And I was so thrilled. And then I got there, and I want to take this moment to talk about a teacher who was so inspiring and pushed me and made me be a better artist. But I can't tell you that story because I had Mrs. Klein, and that's her actual name. You need to know her name because she was the worst human being I'd ever met in my life. She hated everything I did. Every single piece of art I did was not good enough, and she would purposely give me bad grades. And she would say, oh, you need to have more background. Okay, I drew more background. Look, I spent hours drawing more background. Nope, that's not good. And it crushed my soul. I was just like, there's nothing good enough that I can do to appeal to this person who clearly is an expert in her field. And if she doesn't like what I'm doing, then clearly I'm not a good artist. That's done. All right, I'm not gonna be an artist anymore. I did not handle criticism well. So I decided to readjust my future path, and I went all in on school, worked really hard. I was a super nerd. I was in every extracurricular activity you can think of. I eventually graduated. I went to the University of Nebraska at Lincoln, go Big Red, except for right now, they're not very good. I decided I was going to be a pharmacist, and then I realized I'm bad at chemistry, and I decided I was going to be an English major, and I was also going to study secondary education. So that was my new path. But just because I wasn't officially studying any art, it didn't mean that I still wasn't creating art. And a lot of times what I would do is I would just make things for myself to entertain me. So when I was in class, I would always doodle on my notes. These are my actual Shakespeare class notes. My teacher would always get so upset with me. He's like, are you even listening? I'm like, clearly I am. Like, you're talking about Queen Elizabeth right now. So there you go. I didn't intend to show anybody these. They're just kind of for me. And these were like, when I worked at a golf course, we were only allowed to watch the Golf Channel, the Weather Channel, or CNN. And I'm like, I don't want to watch any of those things. So I would just doodle ridiculous stories about chickens and stuff. And that's kind of how I passed the time. But then around my senior year of college, I started getting into digital art. Now, I want to also preface that I was not a very wealthy college student. So I didn't have any money for Photoshop, nor did I have any money for Illustrator, nor did I have any money for really any of the Creative Suite. However, our computers with our school IDs came with a free subscription to PowerPoint, which is how I made all of my illustrations. So I'm going to show you my art, and I recognize now they're a little rough, but please note that they're all made with PowerPoint. I started realizing that everybody kind of had basic shapes, and PowerPoint has basic shapes. So I could pretty easily kind of convert the shapes that you see in a human and kind of put them together and create a caricature. So that's what I started doing. I made my first like series and called it Literature Scribbles, and it was all the authors that I liked. And so all of these are just, if you really look close enough, you can see all of the very simple shapes that are used to kind of develop these. Now I recognize that these could be done so much cleaner, so much more precisely if it was on something like Illustrator or something like Photoshop or now Procreate, but PowerPoint is my weapon of choice at the time. So again, I don't half-ass anything. I did probably about 75 different authors, and then I got bored with authors and started doing characters from different books, and I did about 150 of those. And again, these went absolutely nowhere. I just made them because I wanted to, and I didn't really show anybody. Every so often I would like post them on my social media just because I wanted to like say, hey, look, I made Shakespeare. But it wasn't, that's not what I was going to do with my life. I was going to be a teacher. Around that time I met my husband. We went to college together. We were both in marching band. It's beautiful. But he was one of the first people that I did an actual like caricature of. And he was a jazz musician. This was an accurate representation of our normal conversations. So eventually I graduated college. and I got my first job teaching. And because I was super extra, all of the worksheets I would make myself on PowerPoint. So I taught Spanish for my first year. I wasn't very good at Spanish, to be completely honest, but I was really good at teaching Spanish. I also made all of the caricatures for all of the plays that I taught when I taught my second year, which was English. And I just want to also mention too that sophomores are the worst. Like they're so judgmental. Like I would spend hours making these adorable characters to help them like learn plots of like very complicated plays, and they would draw penises all over them, and I'm like, why are you gonna be like that? Like these are cute. But I still did it because it made me happy. I also started doing portraits of my coworkers, and again, I only had PowerPoint. I really wanted to get better, and I started like being able to figure out some more complex shapes, but for the most part, they're still a little rough. Then when I about 2012, my husband got a job teaching at a private school in Houston, Texas. So we moved there, and they asked if I knew anything about American history. Now you'll remember I studied English and I studied secondary education. I knew nothing about history. And when they asked me in the interview, like, what do you know? I was like, I think we beat the British, jokingly. And they're like, okay. And then I got the job. So I was like, oh, now I actually have to learn something. Okay. But it was fine. It was a private school. It was also an international school. So the majority of the kids knew even less than that. So I was like, okay, I'm fine. So I created an avatar of myself to kind of help teach the kids. I made all of these different educational videos, again, like a freaking psychopath. They were all on PowerPoint. I feel like there were so many easier ways to do this, but I did them all on PowerPoint. And so all of the content we didn't use a textbook. We just did these educational videos. Then a little bit later, I was asked to do some PSAs. So I made another iteration of myself. This was middle school me, and she would try to teach them some lessons. And I was going to show you a snippet from our video, one of the videos that I made, but I want to make sure I get through everything first. But I was pretty proud of it. But as a teacher, I think as an artist, it helped me kind of grow in a bunch of different ways. I got to work with some amazing people and learn how to take criticism better and to work with people and share ideas and grow. I also got to present at a bunch of different conferences for various different things. But the biggest thing that I wasn't prepared for is it really did help me grow as an artist, because around this exact time, I started realizing that, okay, so all of the little people that I make are essentially just like simple shapes, and they're not necessarily too complicated. So I wonder if I could like take the shapes and like cut them out and like make a character that was digital into paper. So I started looking and I'm like, okay, I could do that. And then I could cut it out and then use some tools, and then I could make a paper version. So the main tools that I use for cutting, I use blades and I use a Cameo. For glue, I just use regular Elmer's glue. To add depth, I add these little foam pads and this red tape. So what you see is something that starts off like this, gets broken down into pieces, and then it gets turned into a paper portrait. So I started getting into that. And one of the first things I did was I developed a style that was admittingly, it was terrifying. I don't know why they didn't have pupils. I thought it looked cool. So all of the pictures, I have about 50 of these guys that don't have pupils. Anyway, I don't do that anymore. But one of the biggest projects I completed was I did this huge mural of like nerd art that I liked. So these are all like fandoms that I really like. And around this time, I also had a student who, her name is Regini, and she was also kind of an artist. And she and I would do like, we would talk about art and stuff. She was super shy, but she asked me what I was working on, and I told her, and she's like, oh, can you send me that list? And all of the pieces that you make out of paper, I'm going to make out of clay. And so at the end of the year, I had my piece finished, and she gave me her piece. And so I have a piece that she made, and then my piece. And like I was bawling when she gave it to me. It was the sweetest thing I ever did. But that really awoke something in me as an artist. And from then on, I kind of like I loved all of my students for the most part. I loved all of my students. But I really took a liking and a special interest in the students that were, I felt like me kind of, and were looking to have someone support their art, even though I was their history teacher. So what I would do is I would do art exchanges with my students constantly. So over the years, I kind of accrued a bunch of different portraits that they made of me, and I made for them. And it was wonderful. And kind of putting this together, I made the realization that like this made me grow as an artist because it made me be the kind of person that I wish Mrs. Klein had been. And that made me feel really fulfilled. And this was a good place in my life until 2018 happened. And we had some major life changes. So I got pregnant. This is an accurate depiction of what it looks like to be 8 months pregnant in Texas. I was eating a lot of pizza. I had my son and in June. And so our maternity leave is very short. It was only 6 weeks. So I was back in school in August. And so I had to kind of learn how to rebalance everything, which was a huge challenge. Around this time too, we get to 2020 and quarantine happens and we're staying inside. And at first that was really frustrating and everything. And then I'm like, oh wait, I remember, I don't like being around a lot of people. This is great. This is awesome. So it was really nice kind of just being around my son and my husband and playing games and just relaxing until we had to start doing Zoom calls with the students. That was a challenge. We get to August, school year starts again. That was the hardest teaching I'd ever had to do in my entire life. That's what the first week of school looked like. So we get to the end of the year, and I think we can kind of all look back and say that 2020 was a challenging year for everybody. And my husband and I kind of started talking. We're like, you know, what happens if you like get out of the classroom? And I was like, I've never thought about getting out of the classroom. Like that was just like my path. And he's like, well, but this has been really hard, and I see how stressed you are, and you know, you've done so much more art, and you're getting so many more people interested in you making art. What if we changed our path? So he applied for a job at Sweetwater Sound in Fort Wayne, Indiana, which I did not know was a location until we moved to Fort Wayne, Indiana. And in January, I had to leave my students, which felt horrible at the time. Like it really felt like I was abandoning them. But and we moved to Indiana. So packed up our house, which I would not suggest trying to move with a toddler. Drove our stuff to Indiana and got in our new house. That's our cat. He's very happy to be there. He did not like snow, PS, just for the record. Like he had never seen snow before. He was not a fan. And when we got there, he's like, well, do you want to like sub or something? I'm like, no, it is still COVID. We're in a new place. It's snowing all the time. We're trying to sell it. There's too many variables. I'm going to go all in and just do the art thing. I'm just going to be 100% an artist. And he's like, okay. And I was like, yeah, that sounds good. I can do this. But this is more what it felt like. I was constantly trying to balance things. I was only able to work at night because my son was a handful. I mean, he's 2. So he's, you know, he's not bad. He's just a lot. So this is kind of how it felt, just every day, just spinning wheels, and I was just exhausted. That made me really start to kind of think about how I become successful now at this new path. And I think kind of the turning point to that was when I was a teacher and people asked me what I did. And I said, oh, I'm a teacher. There was no like, oh, what exactly is a teacher? Like, what does a teacher do? And there was never that. They're just like, oh, cool. And now they're like, oh, you're an artist? What kind of art do you do? And I'm like, I like cut out like little pieces of paper and like I make little people. Okay. So there was like this whole identity crisis that I didn't know how to sell myself. And so I kind of started to brainstorm on how to be a creative entrepreneur. And I really boiled it down to 2 sides. There's the professional side and the personal side. The professional side has all of these different logistics that you have to kind of keep in track of. And then the personal side is it making you feel good? Are you feeling happy right now? And so in order to accomplish that, I had to kind of put together a team of people to help me kind of build my brand, what have you. So first we have our social media. She doesn't understand TikTok. She's not going to learn how to do TikTok. And she thinks it's stupid. She works on hashtags. That's mostly her job. Then it's our tech support. She doesn't know anything about computers. So if there's a problem, she just kind of Googles it. And if she can't figure it out, she just decides that it's broken. Then there's our accounting. She keeps telling me that I need to stop buying stickers and glitter and holographic bubble mailers because it's a waste of money, but I disagree. And then there's the creative directors. And if you haven't noticed at this point, they're all me. This is me. I do all of it. I'm by myself. Our CEO can't make any decisions because she's super indecisive. Our shipping person thought that shipping was just shipping, and then we found out it was shipping and logistics, so that should give you an idea of how much she knows about shipping. Our intern gets us coffee and truly enjoys being there for the experience. And then our HR team are horrible. I was not prepared for how much was involved. And listening to Laramie talk too, like I was telling my friend, like I had no idea there was so much involved in all of this. And I just felt completely overwhelmed. This other creator made this pie chart, and I feel like that 100% encompasses what it means to be an artist that people don't see. Also, artist and a small business owner. Just the sheer amount of work that gets involved to what you have to do to be successful. So again, this is kind of how I felt 95% of the time. I felt completely unqualified. I still do sometimes, but I was exhausted. I was overwhelmed. I couldn't do it because in my head, up to that point, to measure success, you had to be formally trained in it. You had to have kind of consistent approval of people, and you have to be competent in all areas of it. That's what success looks like. And I didn't feel like that was any of that. So to kind of, I guess, take that point home, in my mind, what a successful artist was my friend Lydia. My friend Lydia went to school for art. She's worked in commercial painting. She does work for restaurants, and she's done graphic design. Her work sells for thousands of dollars. And when we first met, we had this, I'm laughing because it's embarrassing. We had this initial interaction where she's like, "Oh, you're an artist? I'm an artist too." And she shows me this, and I'm like, "Oh, I don't want to show you what I do now." And she's like, "No, she have like social media?" I'm like, "No." And my husband's like, "Yeah, she does." I'm like, "I do." And so she's like scrolling through. She's like, "Oh." I was like, "Yeah, that's sexy Squidward. I made that." And she's like, "Oh, okay." And so I'm like, "Yeah, no, I'm not an artist. This goes in a museum. This is nice." And so that just like plummeted my self-confidence. So then that really kind of brought home the idea of how do I make the cut figuratively. See, that was clever, I thought. I started working on trying to find an audience, and I really honed on the idea of utilizing social media, which at first I kind of had to get over this like mental perspective of like, I don't want to be like one of those people where it's just like and subscribe, follow me. Like I didn't like that kind of persona, but I realized like in the art world, at least the kind of art that I was doing, it was free advertisement constantly. So I started using Instagram a little bit more regularly, and I started realizing if I utilize different facets of social media, then I could kind of like capitalize on different things, except for TikTok. I swear, I know I keep talking about TikTok. I don't understand it. I tried, like, I don't understand the dances. I appreciate people that can do it, and I've tried. I just can't do it. So a lot of times how I'll use social media in order to kind of garner more interest in my work is like when Laramie was talking about tagging different people, 100% be doing that. If I make something that is to a specific fan base, I'll make sure that that fan base in different facets of social media know about it. So if I make something that's Bob's Burgers, I make sure that goes on the Bob's Burgers fan page, that goes on the Reddit, that goes on Twitter, and I tag all of the workers there. Because what a lot of the work that I do is fan art. So what I've found is you don't need to necessarily have a huge audience, but if you have a really loyal audience that love that particular fan base, you're going to garner support, and that's going to be shared, and that could get them interested in other work that you're doing. To me, social media has had a lot of different benefits for me connecting. I mean, I would not even be here if it wasn't for my ability to connect with people. It gives you immediate feedback, which is always appreciated. You have a huge audience that's constantly changing and evolving and growing, or decreasing, it depends. And you can be trending, which I don't really do that. I just thought that was a cool graphic with the fire. But there's kind of a negative side to it. So this is a piece I made. It's from my favorite Shakespeare play, A Midsummer Night's Dream. It took me several hours to make it. This one actually took a couple days. I was especially proud of it for a number of reasons. It's 5x7, so it's pretty tiny. I got to use different layering techniques. I got to use like shading on the vellum to give it kind of like a smoky, misty feel. I made like glitter on her wings with all the filament and like all this stuff, and it took forever, and I was so proud of it. And I posted it. I'm like, oh my God, people are gonna love it, but they did it. Guess which one they liked more? It was this one. They really liked this one. So anytime I make something that doesn't do well, sometimes that can have a really like stinging effect on you. And social media can be kind of notorious for that. So you kind of have to remind yourself constantly that your likes or your engagement is not directly related to the quality of work that you did. Because I was really proud of that until I posted it, and I was like, okay, maybe it does suck. I don't know. But what I found with social media, and this is kind of getting into the weeds a little bit with it, but what I found with it, there are a million different factors that contribute to your ability to be noticed. And I have to kind of constantly remind myself, like, maybe you didn't use the right hashtags. Maybe you didn't post at the right time. Maybe you're posting too much. Maybe you didn't post a story. Maybe there's just so many things that nobody tells you about with social media, that while it is a good tool to use to gain an audience and to get noticed and to meet new people, it can be really difficult to use that solely on generating your self-worth. I like this a lot too, and this is another artist I really like. She does a ton of cute little motivational things, but this also helps me too. I remember one time I was telling my husband about a piece I did that I worked really hard on, and I was like, yeah, I thought it would do better. He's like, well, did at least one person like it? And I'm like, yeah. He's like, you just need one person to buy it. And I'm like, that's true. Like, I don't need like 100 people to like it. That's not gonna give me Taco Bell. Like, that's fine. The other thing that I found that's kind of helped motivate me continuously as an artist is following people that I think are better than I am, or that inspire me. These are all artists that I regularly follow, that I just think are incredible. And actually, I think Asia was here last year. She's amazing. I have several of her works. I'm just like, I just But in my office, I don't have really any pieces that I've made. It's only pieces that other artists have made, because they inspire me, they motivate me, and they help me kind of develop a style more. And this is another, wrong button. This is another little thing that I kind of think about too. I love looking at other people's work and thinking like, that's such a great idea. I don't want to steal it, but I'm going to make it my own idea. And the best way to do that is to engulf yourself with as many ideas as possible. The last thing that I feel like helps me kind of overcome any sort of doubt I have about being an artist is realizing that success isn't a straight line for me, even though it was when I was in school. It's very crooked. And I like this one because I never really kind of thought about it like that. It's kind of similar, I guess, to being a teacher as well, kind of thinking that like, if I think I'm the best teacher and I don't need to learn anything more, then I probably shouldn't be a teacher anymore. And I think the same kind of goes with being an artist, that success is constantly changing. And it doesn't look like that as being an artist, because our field is so, I guess, evolving, and interests are always changing, and your audience is always going to like different things. Success isn't going to be a defined variable. But the last thing I think that's the most important thing is this notion of keep creating. And I found a video, I don't know if it's going to work, I'm going to try, that I feel like really kind of summarizes like my journey in being an artist. I don't know. And if you've already seen this, I'm sorry in advance, but I don't know if you can hear it. Yeah, I didn't make this, but it's very
Nobody tells people who are beginners, and I really wish somebody had told this to me, is that all of us who do creative work, like, you know, we get into it, and we get into it because we have good taste, but it's like there's a gap. But for the first couple of years that you're making stuff, what you're making isn't so good. Okay, it's not that great. It's trying to be good. It has ambition to be good, but it's not quite that good. But your taste, the thing that got you into the game, your taste is still killer, and your taste is good enough that you can tell that what you're making is kind of a disappointment to you. You know what I mean? A lot of people never get past that phase. A lot of people at that point, they quit. And the thing I would just like say to you with all my heart is that most everybody I know who does interesting creative work, they went through a phase of years where they had really good taste. They could tell what they were making wasn't as good as they wanted it to be. They knew it felt short. It didn't have this special thing that we wanted it to have. And the thing I would say to you is everybody goes through that. And for you to go through it, if you're going through it right now, if you're just getting out of that phase, you got to know it's totally normal. And the most important possible thing you could do is do a lot of work, do a huge volume of work, put yourself on a deadline so that every week or every month, you know you're going to finish one story. Because it's only by actually going through a volume of work that you're actually going to catch up and close that gap. And the work you're making will be as good as your ambitions. It takes a while. It's going to take you a while. It's normal to take a while, and you just have to fight your way through that. Okay?
So that kind of, I think, I didn't make that for the record, but I love that video because as I was going through and preparing for this presentation, kind of going back to Tom saying that I was a caricature without my permission, which is fine. I appreciate it. I realized that I've always kind of been an artist. And I've always been creating art. And just because I didn't identify or label myself as an artist didn't diminish the fact that I was constantly trying to get better and be better. And so now I feel very comfortable saying that my name is Kristy and I'm an artist. And Mrs. Klein can suck it. The end. Thank you.
Oh, am I not on? There we go. Thank you, Kristy. We have a few minutes to take some questions. If anyone has any, I'll come by with the mic. If you want to ask a question, please leave your mask on. We'll be able to hear you just fine. Does anyone have any questions? All right.
Okay. What are you working on right now? Do you have anything in the works?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. So right now I'm kind of having a little bit of a lull. Every month I have kind of a different theme that I do. And so last month I did 31 Days of Halloween, which were all, I chose to do different women in Halloween, so different horror women. And so I haven't done a whole lot now, but my next project, fingers crossed, I'm going to do another ABC where I do a character for each letter. But it's going to be for Harry Potter, and I want to have that done by Christmas. So yeah, that's kind of my ambitious goal right now. Oh, I'm sorry.
You don't really use scissors to cut those tiny little shapes. do you?
No,
Okay.
so I use a variety of different blades. I use Excel. They're my absolute favorite X-Acto knife blades. I have a silhouette cameo that I use for the really intricate bits. And for like kind of larger scale things, I have very like fine tipped, super sharp scissors.
Someone back here have a question? I saw your hand go up.
Well, I was going to ask something similar, like how fragile, they seem small and
Yeah.
fragile. So have you ever worked on one and just like ripped it yourself by
Oh my
accident?
gosh, all the time. Yeah. So I'm gonna go down this paper rabbit hole for a second. So bear with me. But over the years, I've really realized that paper has different textures and different thickness, and so they have different challenges when you're cutting them. So when I'm trying to cut something super duper duper teeny tiny, I can't use like regular cardstock or even like regular paper. I have to use like vinyl, like removable sticky vinyl, because that's more of a plastic sort of consistency, and so then you can't tear it quite as easily. But I've had lots of times where I'll like have an idea of like, okay, I want to cut out something that's super like I did a Spider-Man one time. I was trying to cut out the design on his like chest plate, like the actual spider, and I cut it out probably 4 or 5 times because it just kept tearing. But it's a lot of balance between the type of material that's best suited for that kind of envisioning. And in doing this long enough, I've kind of realized, or I guess expanded my library of like tools that I'm aware of using. So there's vellum, there's using different thicknesses of cardstock, there's cutting it at different levels of it, there's using vinyl. But yeah, every so often I'll definitely try to make something and I'll be like, this is I bit off more than I can chew. I can't do it.
Real quick, and then we'll get to the Zoom questions, or is this? Yeah, I'll come back there in just a second.
Real quick, I just wanted to know if you like still keep in contact with some of your students, or
Oh
are
my
some of
gosh,
them
yes.
adults now, like doing their own thing.
Absolutely. So that that student Regini, she actually is at University of Southern California right now, and she's interning for Pixar. She's like my hero. I love that girl so much, and she's so modest. She's like, no, I'm not that good. I'm like, stop it. When you're famous and getting your Oscar, you better like say, if it wasn't for my 8th grade American history teacher. But she's amazing. I have most of the artists that did portraits for me up there too. One of them is going to medical school / double majoring in art, which I'm like, oh my gosh, that's amazing. So yeah, I am 100% in contact with my students because they're all incredible. 90% of them are incredible, I should say. But
I have my own question for you, not from the Zoom. Have you ever considered using a laser cutter or tried using that to get your delicate paper cuts?
yeah, so I've been actually really wanting to like look at getting a glow forge at some point. I don't know if that would be the best tool to use. It's a matter of like cost and space, neither of which I have a lot of. So but yeah, I've definitely wanted to pursue something like that. I just think it would just like open up doors to like so many more different things that I could possibly make. So yeah. Oh, you're getting Tom
Yep,
running all over the place.
Coming right around. I swear this is efficient. That's what I'm told.
Can you tell me about your trajectory on social media? Like, how did you go from
Yeah.
maybe a few dozen or a few hundred to what you have now?
Yeah, so it actually really started. I had posted a couple things on Reddit actually, and I'm not sure how many people are familiar with using Reddit, but I posted a couple things there, and I garnered a lot of interest that way. And then I was like, oh, this is a really efficient way to get people to find my art. And then I found out that the subreddit that I had been posting it on doesn't like when you use social media links. And so then they wouldn't let me post them anymore. And I'm like, well, that sucks. So then I started posting on Imager, and I would post galleries, and people really enjoyed that. And at the end, they'd be like, hey, do you have any social media? Do you have any shops? I'm like, okay. And so then those would start getting shared more and more. And I think the biggest thing with it is consistently posting and consistently making more things that reach a very wide audience. And I think that's one of the appeals I think that a lot of my audience has with the work that I do is that, okay, maybe you're not into Bob's Burgers, but you're really into Harry Potter. So if I post a Harry Potter thing, like, you're going to get real excited about it. So I think being open to a lot of different fandoms and a lot of different niches has really kind of broadened my audience.
And real quick, just to add to that,
Yeah.
I used to browse Imager pretty frequently.
Yeah.
It was probably like getting too bad for my mental health, but
Oh,
like
no, right?
for a while I'm just like, oh, what am I even? But
Yeah.
that's how I found Kristy, was through
Oh.
Imager about 4 or 5 years ago. It might have been, and
Okay.
it was kind of like playing the long game to get you here.
Oh.
It was like I went from Imager to Instagram to
Yeah.
hey, come talk for us. Caleb has another question.
Do you do a lot of sketching in preparation for
do.
these?
Yeah, I most of the designs that I do start off as like a sketch. They're really rough sketches. And then what I'll do is kind of find a lot of like I still actually kind of stick back to like the basic shapes. They're a little bit more complex. So like a lot of times I almost called this presentation folder full of body parts. Because I have a folder full of like already made body parts that like fit different. It's kind of like a puzzle. Like I'll see a person's face and be like, okay, your face is like this. I know I've cut out a person's face that looks like that already. So I can kind of tweak it a little bit and it works. So it's a lot of kind of like, sometimes it's completely new, but a lot of times it's like visioning what I've done before and being able to like mold it to a new person. But that always starts with the sketch. So yeah.
Cool.
Yeah,
Well,
yeah,
thank you, Kristy.
absolutely.
Very, very much appreciate you being here. Everyone, let's give Kristy a round of applause.
Thank
please.
you.